Prior to the season, Europe seemed to have a pretty obvious top two teams in the region. It was Vitality and Carmine Corps in whatever order you wanted to put them in. After them, there were a couple of teams that you could convince me in any order were the teams to come after them. Ninjas in Pajamas, Dignitas, Geek Esports, and Gentlemates Alpine. After that, there seemed to be a pretty significant drop off to a ton of teams like Synergy, Save the Game, Start Point, 100% Fast Forward, Redemption. You could insert whatever scrappy team you wanted to put next. I even left out a team like RRG who have looked great through Open 1. After Event 1, we've seen 100% leap up towards that top group. We now have teams like Gentlemates Alpine and Dignitas chasing them in order to qualify for the Birmingham LAN. It was a tremendous start for that Louis P, Acro, and Resi trio, and I want to talk more about them in a second. But first, I want to talk about their Group B opening round matchup opponents, Gentlemates Alpine. This Gentlemates squad, consisting of Frenchmen Seiko, Radosin, and Juicy, they feel like a shoe-in for the first major of the season, but their Open 1 top 6 finish has them chasing teams like 100% in order to qualify. I talked about Gentlemates Alpine and the construction of this team and their offseason at length with Michael, formerly of Shift, on my Need Boost podcast. If you want to hear our full opinions on that and a bunch of other fun stuff, check in the description below. I have put a link to that podcast. Now, statistically, this team leans defensively. While our other three frontrunners in Europe, that being Vitality, Carmine Corps, and Ninjas in Pajamas, they're top 5 in goals per game after one events. Gentlemates are ranked 13th. Furthermore, Gentlemates only registered 7.3 shots per game, which is a full 3 shots behind Team Vitality, just to kind of show you the distance in the offensive output between these teams. Gentlemates are doing great around the edges. They're delivering top 3 results in save percentage, which is if you take the number of shots your opponent takes on net, it's the percentage of those that you're actually saving as opposed to them missing or the shot going in. They're top 3 in that. They saved 65% of their total shots, and to compare them against another top team like Ninjas in Pajamas, they saved only 57%. But before we get way too deep into number soup here, they're also top 3 in assist percentage and 4th in opponent's shooting percentage. These stats are pretty out of whack, given that Gentlemates ran over the competition in the group stage. They went 3-0 and furthermore went 9-0. So if you take those stats and then compare those, mush them together with their group and playoff stats, it gets a little messy pretty quick. After that 9-0 group stage, they had some long, drawn-out battles with some of the best competition Europe has to offer. To that point, we actually got a great look at this team stacking up against the competition. They played against Carmine Corps, Vitality, Ninjas in Pajamas, Geek Esports, all within the same event. The challenge is, however, that they lost their matchups to the teams who we think might be above them. They got swept by Carmine, who looked freaking awesome all event long. They lost 4-1 to Vitality, who outscored them 13-4. And they lost a Game 7 matchup against Ninjas in Pajamas to be bounced from the tournament. Now, if I'm putting my eyes on one player in particular, I'm looking at Seiko to step up offensively for this team. Seiko has long been a player who is a killer on the offensive end, especially in transition with the ball and boost. He can be deadly throughout his career. It's what elevated him to the status he has had previously and is what allowed him to be a world champion on world championship rosters all the way back to the endpoint days and what he was able to do for Team BDS. This team, predicated primarily on the defensive end, has seen Radosin and Juicy collect 15 combined savior medals through the group and playoff stages of one event, which is excellent. Clearly, you have a defensive identity. You're not getting overwhelmed with shots necessarily, but you have a solid base. Now you need to score, and I think the first name in that conversation has to be Seiko, who has been held scoreless in 15 of the 25 group and playoff games the Gentlemates have played. If he could find more consistency and more pop-offs, this team could probably coast into a spot at the Birmingham Major with a huge chip on their shoulder. This team has three players who have all had massive moments at land. So as long as they get there, this is a team that I won't count out. And to talk a little bit more about some of those pop-offs, Seiko has only scored 2 or more goals in 3 of those 25 games. And one of them was when he put up 4 against Start Point. So for a player who has been so dynamic and has meant so much as an offensive asset for so many rosters, I want to see Seiko kind of find his footing on that end of the ball again to make this a more complete and comprehensive team. All right, now let's talk about their opponents 100%, who, like we said at the top, great start. They are top 4 in the points so far. 2/3 of this team, if you remember, competed and quote unquote won the uncompleted Shift Summer League event that happened this offseason for Europe. Acro and Louis P are the returners, and they've added Rezi, who you probably know from Hogan Mode, Moist Esports, Jobless, or some combination of those. A player who has great instincts on the ball and mechanically is definitely up to snuff with the new rise in talent that we're seeing catch up, the next generation, if you will. This team had a great run to their top 4 finish. It's the team I'm most interested to see if they can keep up their hot start compared to their peers gunning for these land spots. Honestly, really impressive resume in Event 1. They beat Synergy, Save the Game, which is Astral, Extra, and Metzer. They beat Geekay, they beat RRG, and they beat Dignitas in a Game 7, which was really big and now has Dignitas firmly in the chase as well, tied with Gentlemates in points. They took Carmine to a Game 5, and finally, to exit the tournament, they were also blown out by Team Vitality in the semis by a scoreline of 12-3 in the goal differential. Defensively, impressive. We're going to see if this team can keep this up. They're allowing nearly 10 shots per game, which is, about average. They are, however, saving more shots than any of the other teams. They're just ahead of teams like Carmine and Ninjas. They have also held opponents to a paltry 19% shooting percentage, which is good enough to be top 3 from Event 1. Now, the difference between 100% and some of the other top teams who are performing well defensively, Vitality, Ninjas in Pajamas, KC, of course, is that those teams are holding their opponents to a low shooting percentage, recording good saves, but also not allowing a ton of shots against them. And that's the difference between them and 100%, who are getting shot on quite a bit. They were just able to really, put their feet down in the paint and be a brick wall defensively and eliminate a lot of these goal attempts that were put on their net. Is that something that you can continue past one event? We're going to see. Acro was a standout offensively. He was one of only 4 players to average above or near a goal per game, which is very impressive. Louis P and Rezi are both above 2 saves per game. And the thing I like most about this team is that you just can't count them out. And one stat that I want to use to kind of encapsulate that is first goal statistics. And a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, by the way, comes from Direct. I'm going to put him on the screen right now, and I'll put his stat sheet in the description below as well, next to the Need Boost podcast episode that we talked about earlier. But first goal stats, to kind of talk through this, whether or not your team scores first or not. It actually is more of a predictor of winning than you might assume. Generally speaking, if you're scored on first, you have under a 20% chance of winning that game, which is crazy. You would assume that the first goal doesn't totally matter. There's a chance you can come back. Actually, if you score first, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to end up winning that game, but 100% bucks that trend. They are being scored on first in more than half of their games, 55%, which is crazy. You would assume that if you're getting scored on first in more than half of your games, you would not be a top 4 team. But 100% is not shaken by being scored on first. They're actually winning 31% of these games. So while the average is 19%, they're winning 31%. It doesn't sound like a lot. It's only 11%, but hey, every game matters. And especially when you're taking a lot of your opponents deep and you're getting deep into these tournaments, I think being able to be resilient is something that is very impactful. Also, another small thing that stood out to me in their loss to Carmine Corps, it was actually the smallest shot differential of any KC opponent, which, you know, it was a 5 game series, so those statistics are a little bit more condensed than they would be in their 7 game series. But any good thing that you can glean from a matchup against Carmine Corps, who look like the best team in the world so far, we're going to take that as a positive. Now, 100%, they've had a much rougher go of things starting off Open 2 than Open 1. They went to round 5 and they lost to Dignitas. They lost to Save the Game. They went to game 5 and 4 of their 5 series. These could just be a part of the caveat that I gave earlier that really this whole video deserves, which is we're talking about a very small sample size here when we're digging into the data. But it could mean that Open 1 was just a flash in the pan and we're going to see 100% kind of revert to the mean and be that kind of 6 to 8 ranked team that we anticipated that they would be, or they could bounce back and have a big win here to open things up against Gentlemates Alpine. We'll know further once these two teams match up against each other this weekend, and really excited to see what Europe has to offer. This region is a lot more competitive in that middle section than we thought it might be, and hopefully it continues to be that way as we kind of have these teams jockeying for those spots alongside Vitality and Carmine Corps. But guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me and watch. Hope you have a great rest of your day.